Alma Reyes pressed her palm against the cool porcelain of the kitchen sink. Her gaze locked on the scrap of paper clutched between trembling fingers. Crumpled and stained with coffee rings, it read, "You deserve better, but it's not me. Goodbye." The words stabbed through the quiet of their small rental home sharper than any blade. She blinked, hoping the note would dissolve into the morning light streaming through the window. But the message stayed, mocking her. Tom was gone. No warning, no suitcase. Just 3 chilling sentences and an empty hallway. She slid to the floor, knees brushing against the chipped linoleum, and let the note fall. Her heart pounded like a frantic drum as images of last night's argument replayed. Tom's face twisted in anger at an accusation Alma barely understood. The slam of the front door, the hollow echo of his footsteps fading into distance. She thought she'd married a steady man, until he became a ghost. A soft knock startled her. Mateo's small frame filled the doorway, his backpack dangling from one shoulder. His brown eyes glistened with confusion. "Mom, why is Daddy not here?" he asked, voice so small it crackled against Alma's raw nerves. She swallowed hard and forced a calm she did not feel. "Daddy had to go away for a bit, sweetheart," she whispered, pulling Mateo into her lap. "Mommy's not sure when he'll come back." She stroked his hair, inhaling the clean, comforting scent of his shampoo. He hugged her tightly, clutching the fabric of her shirt as though he could hold the world together in his arms. Alma guided him to the little table by the window. She placed 2 bowls of oatmeal before them, the bland food a silent promise that life would, somehow, keep moving forward. Outside, the street buzzed to life. A bus creaked around the corner, a dog barked from a neighbor's yard, and somewhere down the block, the church bell tolled the hour. She spooned oatmeal into Mateo's mouth, her hand slightly shaking. Each childlike question he asked a fresh crack in her resolve. As Mateo ate, Alma's thoughts stormed. How would she pay rent next week? Who would pick him up from school when her second evening shift began? The weight of her responsibilities pressed against her chest like a vice. She closed her eyes and drew in a shuddering breath. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "You are stronger than you know." Alma didn't feel strong. She felt hollow. But as Mateo finished his oatmeal and bounded off to get dressed, Alma rose. She wiped her tears with the hem of her apron and tucked the note in her pocket. Today she would stand tall, for her son, for herself. She filled the kettle with water, its rattling whistle reminding her that routine could be a lifeline. With trembling hands, she measured coffee grounds, determined to pour strength into each cup. When the kettle boiled, Alma poured herself a mug and stepped onto the small porch. The sun had climbed higher, warming her back. She closed her eyes and let the heat seep into her bones. The past was gone. The man who promised her forever was gone, but she remained. Alma lifted her chin, gripping the mug as if it were a shield. Tomorrow, she decided, she would prove that being used and left was only the beginning of her story. The grocery store's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Alma navigated narrow aisles stocked with bargain brand cereals and dented cans of beans. She pushed a squeaky cart, adjusting Mateo's new backpack so it sat evenly against his shoulders. The world around her felt alien, every glance from other shoppers like a secret verdict on her worth. In the checkout line, 2 women ahead of them laughed softly, their heels clicking on the linoleum. Alma heard snippets. "Single mother," one said, thumb flicking toward Alma's cart. "Who's going to want that baggage?" The other snorted. "Heard she's barely scraping by." Their words landed like stones. She tightened her grip on the cart handle, hard hammering. Mateo twisted on his heel. "Mom, did they say something about me?" he whispered, voice quivering. She put a hand on his back, forcing warmth into her voice. "Some people say unkind things when they don't understand. But you and I, we know the truth." He offered a small, trusting smile before his gaze drifted back to the magazines at the counter. A sudden clang of a drop jar made Alma flinch. A middle-aged cashier glanced at her receipt and frowned at the total. Alma opened her purse and counted coins, the smallest indignity slicing deeper than any whispered insult. She paid with exact change, refusing offers to round up her purchase. Outside, The August sun felt sharp on her face. She loaded groceries into the car. Mateo perched in the passenger seat, legs too long for his chair. Alma placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Let's get home, and I'll make us lunch." She squeezed his shoulder. His eyes, bright with residual hurt, reminded her why she needed to rise above. At home, she unpacked beans and rice, humming a lilting tune her grandmother taught her. Cooking provided reprieve, a chance to create something nourishing when everything else felt broken. Mateo washed lettuce leaves, his small hands serious with purpose. When they ate, he declared it the best meal ever, and Alma tucked that praise into her heart like a talisman. That evening, as sunlight drained from the sky, Alma sat at the kitchen table and opened the mail. Bills, and more bills crowded the envelopes. She lined them up, pencil in hand, and mapped out the coming month. The rent would be late again. Her second job, cleaning the offices downtown, would have to cover the difference. Exhaustion curled around her limbs like fog, but she refused to yield. Later, after Mateo slept, Alma sat on the porch with her coffee, the night air cool against her skin. She replayed the women's whispers, the cashier's judgment, her son's anxious look. Each moment stoked a quiet fury in her chest. She would not be defined by other people's cruelty. Tomorrow, she'd carry her head higher. For every whisper meant a shame. She'd let her courage roar louder. Sunday morning light filtered through floral curtains as Alma pulled on a faded cardigan. Today was church day, a chance to find peace, or at least silence the doubts whispering in her mind. Mateo hopped alongside her in the pew as Pastor Gallagher spoke of forgiveness. Alma's thoughts drifted to Ruth, her older sister, whose betrayal cut deeper than any stranger's cold glance. After service, church ladies' tea was served in the fellowship hall. Alma balanced a paper plate of cakes and a steaming cup of tea as Ruth approached, lips curved into a tight smile. Ruth's eyes flicked over Alma's stain-flecked blouse, then settled on her. "You look tired," she said, voice smooth. "Maybe it's time you stopped playing the victim. Men leave. Happens all the time." A hush fell. Alma felt faces turn toward them. She set down her tea with a trembling hand. "Ruth," she said softly, "you don't know what happened between me and Tom. You weren't there." Ruth's laugh was light, mocking. "Please. He told me everything. Your husband, he didn't leave you for me. I wouldn't stoop so low. He left you for a younger woman. But don't cry for me, Al. You chose the lie you wanted more than you wanted him." Alma's chest tightened. Years of sisterly closeness dissolved in that moment, leaving only jagged shards of hurt. She stood, ignoring the sympathetic looks around the hall. "I hope someday you find happiness, Ruth," she said, voice quavering but firm. Turning, she grabbed Mateo's hand and walked out, leaving her sister and the church's whispered judgments behind. Outside, summer air wrapped around her like a shroud. Alma guided Mateo toward their old sedan. He glanced up at her, confusion mixing with concern. "Mom, why did Cousin Ruth say those things?" she swallowed. "People say things when they're hurt, sweetheart, but we know the truth in our hearts." She buckled him in and slid into the driver's seat. As the engine started, Alma realized something vital. Family ties could break, but her love for Mateo and belief in herself would never waver. She drove home in silence, every mile a promise to rebuild her life on strength, not on the shifting sands of others' opinions. By Tuesday, exhaustion was a constant companion. After daytime shifts cleaning hospital rooms, Alma raced across town to tidy glass-front offices until midnight. Her uniform reeked of bleach and coffee. Dark circles carved hollows beneath her eyes. Yet each knock on a patient's door or each wiped-down desk was a step toward stability. Last night's encounter with Ruth lingered in her mind. How could someone born of the same mother treat her so cruelly? The question haunted her as she scrubbed floors and made beds, humming lullabies under her breath to soothe both her patients and her fraying nerves. Back in her apartment at 1 a.m., Mateo's soft breathing drew her to his bedroom door. He slept curled beneath a threadbare blanket, clutching a tattered teddy bear. Alma watched him for a moment, heart swelling with love and guilt. She bent and kissed his forehead. "Mama's right here," she whispered into the dark. She padded to the kitchen and brewed instant coffee, its bitter warmth a flicker of alertness. The clock ticked past 2. Minutes later, fatigue claimed her at the table. She drifted into a shallow sleep with bills spread before her, dreaming of better days. Morning arrived in gray light. Storm clouds rolled overhead as she woke with a start, splinters of memory jolting her upright. She rubbed her temples and glanced at the clock. 15 minutes until school pickup. She grabbed her bag and rushed out, keys jangling in her hand. At the schoolyard, Mateo waited, scanning the exit with hopeful eyes. When he saw her, his face lit up with relief. "I thought you wouldn't make it, Mom." Alma hugged him tightly, tasting tears she refused to shed in front of him. "Nothing will ever keep me away," she promised. "Let's get home, and you can tell me about your day." Inside, she warmed leftovers, while Mateo chattered about class projects. Alma nodded along, heart aching to soak in every detail. After dinner, she tucked him into bed and watched him fall asleep, drawing strength from the rise and fall of his chest. Before collapsing into her own restless slumber, Alma whispered a vow. She would endure these endless nights. Every bead of sweat, every ache in her limbs, each cost of living crisis would be a stepping stone. For Mateo, for herself. With the dawn, she would rise again, willing to push through darkness toward a future shaped by her own hands. Wednesday dawned pale and cool. Alma stood by the window, pulling on her scrubs, cobalt blue fabric stiff from last night's wash. She watched Mateo slip out of his room, hugging his favorite blanket to his chest. He glanced at her face, searching for clues. "Mom, did Daddy leave because I was bad?" he asked as he reached for a cereal bowl. His voice trembled, worry clouding his young eyes. Alma's heart shattered at the question. She knelt before him, brushing a curl from his forehead. "No, mi amor. Never you." She forced a smile. "Your daddy left because he struggled with his own problems. None of it was your fault." He frowned, looping cereal in milk and then staring at it as though it held secrets. "But if I was really good, would he come back?" Tears burned behind her eyelids. She scooped him into her lap and enveloped him in an embrace. "You are perfect, every bit of you. And even if he never returns, I will always stay. Always." He nestled against her, nodding slowly. She whispered promises into his hair. "Together, we will build a life filled with love. A life where no one makes you feel like baggage." After school, they walked hand in hand through the neighborhood park. Leaves rustled underfoot, and distant laughter drifted from a playground. Mateo paused at the swings and looked at his mother. "Can you push me?" he asked, eyes brightening. Alma smiled and gave him a gentle shove. He soared higher, giggling as wind whipped through his hair. Each laugh stitched a small patch of healing in her heart. They paused on a bench afterward, sipping hot chocolate from travel mugs. Alma watched children chase each other, free of adult burdens. She envied their innocence, but refused to let sorrow steal Mateo's joy. "Mom, do you think I can be happy without Daddy?" he asked, voice tentative. Alma swallowed the lump in her throat. "Happiness isn't about who's missing," she replied. "It's about who's here. And I'm here. You're here. And we'll find joy in each other." He smiled up at her, the weight of his question lifting like morning mist. Alma returned his smile, feeling a spark of hope kindle in her chest. The road ahead would be hard, but with Mateo by her side, she believed they could navigate any challenge. His trust was her promise. She would protect his heart and hers, forging a future built on love, not on departures. Sunday morning sunlight filtered through the stained-glass windows of Holy Grace Church as Alma tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She clutched Mateo's hand and stepped into the hushed nave, the scent of beeswax candles and old wood wrapping around her like a balm. Today she needed prayer, or at least a moment's peace before yet another week of endless shifts. After the service, the congregation dispersed to the fellowship hall for coffee and donut holes. Alma balanced Mateo on her hip as she joined the line. Laughter and conversation bubbled around her, but her thoughts remained tangled in worries about rent and bills. She poured juice for her son and reached for a styrofoam cup of coffee when a kindly voice called, "Excuse me, dear." Alma turned to see Mrs. Elvira Dawson, the frail widow she'd often noticed greeting worshippers at the door. Elvira's white hair was neatly coiled at the nape of her neck, and her cane clicked softly against the tile. "You look like you manage more than one burden," Elvira said, eyes twinkling from behind cat-eye glasses. "Do you know anyone who needs occasional help around the house? Cleaning, cooking errands?" Alma felt her pulse quicken. She had spent years scraping by, but this was different, an offer, not a handout. She swallowed. I could use the extra work." Her voice sounded small in the cavernous room. "I clean houses sometimes, but hours are irregular." Elvira nodded sympathetically. "I understand. My late husband handled all the chores. Since his passing, I hardly manage my own meals. I'd pay fairly and flexible hours." She pressed a crisp business card into Alma's hand. "Think about it. Call me this week." Alma blinked at the card. Elvira Dawson, private home. It felt unreal. Soon, she and Mateo tumbled home on the bus, her heart hammering with cautious hope. She replayed Elvira's gentle smile and the weight of opportunity settling in her chest. That evening, after Mateo finished homework, Alma dialed the number. Elvira answered on the third ring, voice mild but firm. "Ms. Reyes, so glad you called. Would tomorrow at 9 be convenient?" Alma confirmed and scheduled her first visit. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay awake listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, mind racing with possibilities. A steady job with regular pay could mean rent on time, a proper dinner, and no more nights counting coins for milk. Most of all, it could mean dignity, working not for pity, but for respect. The next morning, Alma dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, smoothing wrinkles with trembling fingers. Mateo kissed her cheek and scampered out the door. At Elvira's address, a neat brick bungalow edged with white roses, Alma hesitated at the gate. She squared her shoulders and knocked. The door opened before her knuckles finished rapping. Elvira, in a floral robe, ushered her inside. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Let me show you around." As Alma toured the spotless but aging rooms, Elvira pointed out tasks: dusting shelves, polishing silver, preparing midday tea. She spoke with quiet gratitude. In that moment, Alma felt layers of shame and fear peel away. Here, she was valued for her labor, not judged for her past. Before leaving, Elvira poured 2 cups of tea in delicate china. They sat at a lace-covered table by the window. Mateo tugged at Alma's sleeve, and Elvira smiled, offering him a cookie. The old woman's kindness filled the space between them, a bridge across Alma's loneliness. On the bus ride home, Alma sipped iced water and cradled Elvira's card in her palm. She felt a ripple of hope bloom. A chance knock had opened a door she didn't know existed, and she would step through it. Alma arrived at Elvira's house the next morning prompt at 9. Mateo tucked into a borrowed fold-out day bed by the sunroom window. Elvira greeted them with a warm smile, handing Alma a feather duster. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old books. "Upstairs," Elvira said, voice gentle. "The master bedroom needs fresh linens." She led Alma up a narrow staircase. On the landing, a single door stood closed, its paint chipping around the edges. Elvira paused. "That room remains locked." Alma raised an eyebrow. "Locked?" She glanced at the key ring Elvira wore around her neck. One key seemed to match the door, but Elvira shook her head. Some doors stay closed for reasons no one questions. Then she slipped the key back under her blouse and moved on. Curiosity curled in Alma's chest like a restless cat. She made the bed in the adjoining room, but her mind kept darting back to that closed door. Questions buzzed. What was inside? Was it a keepsake? A painful memory? She wiped perspiration from her brow and packed away the bedding, determined to respect boundaries, but burning to know more. Downstairs, she polished silver trays, while Elvira prepared tea. The widow hummed an old hymn, voice soft and unhurried. Alma set out cookies and poured china cups, but her thoughts stayed trapped behind that locked door. At midday, Elvira asked, "Would you mind carrying a box from the office upstairs?" She handed Alma a heavy cardboard container sealed with tape. Alma's stomach flipped. Why had Elvira trusted her with this? As she climbed the stairs again, The box seemed to pulse with secret weight. She crossed the landing and stepped inside the office. On the desk lay photos and frames. A young man in military uniform, smiling shyly. A faded portrait of a child at a seaside, laughing with bright eyes. Alma's fingers tingled. She turned to move the box, and found herself staring at the locked door. Instinct warred with propriety. She glanced back at the office. No one was watching. Her heart thrummed like a hummingbird's wings. She reached for the doorknob. Just as her fingertips brushed the cold metal, footsteps echoed from below. Alma yanked her hand away and hurried inside the office, locking the door with the box. Elvira appeared in the doorway. "All set?" she asked. "Thank you, dear." She lifted the box and carried it into the hallway. Alma exhaled, pulse slowing. Elvira paused by the locked door, tracing her fingertip across its surface. "Some stories are safer left untold," she said quietly, then guided Alma downstairs. That night, Alma lay in bed, replaying the morning's events. The locked room beckoned in her dreams, a silhouette behind frosted glass, voices she couldn't hear. She worried she'd betrayed Elvira's trust by wanting more. Yet the mystery tugged at her like a promise. She drifted into uneasy sleep, determined tomorrow to serve faithfully and resist temptation, though her curiosity felt as alive as her own heartbeat. By Thursday evening, Alma felt more at ease in Elvira's home. She polished silver, dusted bookcases, and scrubbed the kitchen until tile gleamed. When the last task was done, Elvira beckoned her into the cozy dining room, where a small table was set with linen placemats, softly glowing candles, and floral china. "This is for you," Elvira said, motioning to a vacant chair. "I insist we dine together tonight." Alma hesitated. She'd expected payment, not a personal invitation, but followed. Mateo settled across from them, clutching his favorite teddy. The atmosphere felt like sunlight caught in amber, warm, golden, unhurried. Elvira served bowls of hearty vegetable soup, ladling generous portions of broth and roasted carrots. Alma savored the steam, inhaling spices that whispered of home. The first spoonful was pure comfort. She glanced at Mateo, eyes bright as he slurped noisily. Elvira smiled indulgently. They ate in companionable silence until Elvira cleared her throat. "Alma," she began, voice gentle, "I've been thinking." She lifted her cup of tea and continued, "You remind me of someone I once knew." Alma's curiosity prickled, but she nodded for Elvira to go on. "My son Daniel," Elvira said, eyes misting. "He was kind, hard-working, much like you. He enlisted in the army and was killed overseas." She paused, steadying herself on her cane. "I was too proud to ask for help. I locked his room and closed the door. Then I buried my grief and carried on." She tapped the table. "Until today. Your strength, your care for your son, brought back memories I buried long ago." Alma's throat tightened. "Mrs. Dawson, I'm so sorry." She reached across the table, placing her hand over Elvira's. Heat radiated from her palm. "Your son sounds like a brave man." Elvira offered a sad smile. "He was. And you are brave, too." She released Alma's hand. "I want you to understand something about doors and rooms." She set down her spoon and stood, moving toward the staircase. Alma exchanged a glance with Mateo, who looked puzzled. Upstairs, Elvira paused before the locked door and placed her hand on the knob. Alma stiffened, but instead of unlocking it, Elvira smiled and withdrew her hand. "Not today," she whispered, "but soon." Then she returned to the dining room, leaving Alma with a swirl of questions and gratitude. Back at the table, Alma's heart felt fuller than it had in months. Over steaming soup and soft candlelight, a bond was forged between the widow and the young mother. Shared losses, mutual respect, and an unspoken promise that neither would face grief alone. As they finished their meal and cleared the dishes together, Alma realized this work was more than a job. It was a gift of community, compassion, and hope. Word spread fast in a small town, especially juicy gossip about Tom's return. Alma heard the rumors before she saw him. Hushed voices in the supermarket, sideways glances at the schoolyard, an icy chill in the church pews. She kept her head down as she carried bags of groceries. focusing on the weight in her arms rather than the weight of stairs. 2 days after dinner with Elvira, Alma arrived at the widow's doorstep to find a group of women on the lawn, whispering behind pursed lips. One recognized her and nodded sharply. Alma's pulse stuttered. She forced a polite smile. Mrs. Dawson waved her in, leaving the gossiping circle behind the front hedge. Inside, Elvira studied her with concern. "They gossip," the old woman said, closing the door against the afternoon sun. "My lawyers warned me it would follow you." Alma sighed and sank into a wingback chair. "Is it about me?" Elvira poured tea. "Partly," she said, "and partly about him." She gestured toward a framed photo of Daniel on her mantel. "You're not imagining it. Talk spins wild in this place." Alma's thoughts flicked to Tom. He'd left once and returned for her sister, rubbing salt into wounds that barely had time to scab. She steeled herself, but inside a coil of dread tightened. That evening, church doors opened again, and Alma slid into a pew at the back. She knelt, palms pressed together, and prayed that her son would be shielded from pain she could not erase. The stained glass painted her hands in jeweled tones as the pastor's voice rose and fell. After service, Ruth appeared at the exit, arm in arm with Tom. Their laughter bounced off the old brick walls. Alma froze as Tom's eyes met hers. There was guilt there, she thought, or maybe hesitation. Before she could move, Ruth whispered to the women beside her, loud enough for Alma to hear. She always knew how to play victim. "No one's buying it anymore." Shock rippled through Alma, and she hurried past, cheeks hot. Outside, the night air tasted of rain. Mateo clung to her hand. "Mom, are they talking about us?" he asked. She bent and kissed his forehead. "Some people say things," she murmured. "They're afraid of what they don't understand." He looked up. "But I love you, Mom." A fierce protectiveness rose in her chest. "I know, and I love you more than anything." She lifted him into her arms and crossed the church lawn. Under the glow of the street lamp, shadows moved, but Alma and Mateo walked forward, just the two of them, untouched by the town's cruel whispers. Friday afternoon, Alma learned that Tom and Ruth planned a celebratory dinner in the town diner, where rumors said he would propose to her. Anger flared in Alma's chest like wildfire. She needed closure. She needed to see, once and for all, that this betrayal was real and final. She told Mrs. Dawson she had errands and drove toward the diner, windows down and wind chasing through her hair. Her hands gripped the steering wheel as if it were the only anchor in a storm. Guilt pricked at her. Was this confrontation childish? But she needed truth more than peace. The diner's neon sign buzzed orange and red against the twilight sky. Alma entered and paused by the counter, spotting Ruth in a booth, Tom across from her, leaning in with an easy smile that once belonged to Alma. Her breath caught in her throat. Her heart thudded like a trapped bird. She took a steadying breath and approached. Ruth glanced up, surprise blooming in her eyes, then flicking to shock as Alma slid into the booth. Tom's mouth opened and closed. Guilt slicked across his expression. Ruth's tone was cool, dismissive. "Alma, to what do we owe this pleasure?" She folded her arms, posture rigid. Alma forced calm. "I wanted to see it for myself." She turned to Tom. "Is it true? You came back for her?" Tom's gaze dropped. I'm sorry." His voice wavered. "I made a mistake." Ruth scoffed. "He's forgiven me, if that means anything." She reached for his hand. Alma let the moment stretch before answering. She inhaled and spoke, voice strong despite the tremor beneath. "He hurt me once. He hurt me twice. I won't be hurt again." She tipped back her chair. "I forgive you both, but I won't be part of this." Ruth's lips curled in triumph. "Fine by me." She squeezed Tom's hand as if to brand Alma irrelevant. Tom looked away. Alma stood. Before she walked away, she let her gaze linger on them. Two people wrapped in betrayal and lies. Her shoulders straightened. The door's bell jingled as she left, and the cool night air felt like rebirth on her skin. Outside, she dialed Mrs. Dawson. "Elvira, can I come by?" she asked. "I need a friend." Moments later, Alma crossed the threshold of the widow's home. Elvira enveloped her in a warm embrace. Alma exhaled a lifetime of hurt into the older woman's arms. I've let him define me for too long. Alma whispered. No more. Elvira lifted her chin. He never defined you. You defined yourself, through every hardship. She guided Alma to the living room. Now let's talk about plans for your future. Alma nodded, hope and resolve burning bright. For the first time since Tom's note, she felt truly free. Saturday afternoon found Alma and Mateo at the town park, the late spring air warm with the promise of summer. Mateo chased pigeons across the grass, while Alma settled on a bench, flipping through a battered parenting pamphlet. She looked up when she heard a familiar voice. Alma, Tom called, stepping onto the path. His posture was uncertain, shoulders hunched as though bracing for a storm. He stood a few feet away, clutching a plastic shopping bag. Mateo froze mid-run as Tom's gaze dropped to him. Dad, Mateo whispered, voice somewhere between hope and fear. He stopped and stared. Alma rose, heart pounding. Mateo, honey, why don't you go get some ice cream by the fountain? She suggested, nodding to the vendor across the lawn. He obeyed, trudging away, eyes on his father until the vendor distracted him. Alma squared her shoulders. What are you doing here? She asked softly. Tom shifted the bag. I wanted to see you, both of you, he said. His voice cracked like thin ice. I brought something for Mateo. He held out the bag, which jingled with small packages. Alma crossed her arms. He doesn't need anything from you. Tom's face tightened. I know I ruined things. I just wanted a chance to say I'm sorry. He hesitated and opened the bag, pulling out a model airplane kit, a blue biplane. I remember how much he loved these. Alma frowned. You remember? She asked, voice brittle. You left us. You vanished. Tom's eyes glistened. I was ashamed. I lost my job, slipped into debt. I thought I'd come back when I had myself together. He swallowed. Clearly, I was wrong. Alma's throat tightened. The past months had been a brutal dance of work, tears, and hope reborn. Mateo doesn't need you when you're not here, she said. Tom bit his lip. I still care about him, about you. He took a tentative step closer. Please let me help. Alma exhaled, pain and resolve warring inside her. You can't rewrite history, she replied. He doesn't need half measures. She reached into her pocket and produced Mrs. Dawson's card. If you really want to help him, ask Miss Dawson. She's been there for us when you weren't. Tom's face blanched. He nodded, voice small. I will. Before Alma could respond, Mateo ran back, clutching his ice cream. He held it out to Tom. Look, Dad, chocolate. Tom's eyes softened. He accepted the cone. Mateo beamed. Alma watched them, heart shifting. They licked ice cream as awkward silence stretched between past and present. Tom turned to Alma, cone in hand. Thank you, he said quietly. I'm sorry. Alma studied his solemn expression. She had forgiven Elvira's inheritance, confronted Ruth's betrayal, and protected Mateo's heart. Now it was time to decide if she could forgive Tom's return. She nodded once, decisively. We'll talk later, she said. For now, don't disappear again. Tom offered a tentative, grateful smile. As he and Mateo walked toward the swings, Alma stood on the grass, watching them. The afternoon sun cast long shadows, but in her chest, a glimmer of cautious hope began to warm her heart. That evening, Alma returned to her second job, tidying offices downtown until closing. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and her joints ached from scrubbing floors the night before. Yet her mind replayed the park scene. Tom's apology, Mateo's hopeful grin, the scent of chocolate ice cream. She forced focus on dusting shelves lined with glass awards and binders. Around midnight, she clocked out. Rain dripped from her umbrella as she rushed to her car. The nearly empty parking garage echoed her footsteps. She reached the driver's seat and sank in, exhaustion crashing into her chest. She fumbled for her phone. It was 12:37 a.m. She dialed Mrs. Dawson. No answer. She tried again. Voicemail. She sat with the ringing tone for a long moment, then ended the call. Her head lolled against the seatback. Tears pooled in her eyes, unbidden. Weeks of relentless work, worry over rent, and the raw emotion of Tom's return converged into a tidal wave. Her breath hitched. She pressed her palms to the steering wheel. "I can't do this," she whispered to the empty car. The tears came fast, hot against her cheeks. For a moment, she let herself collapse into grief. Grief for the marriage she thought she had, for the sister who betrayed her, for the child who deserved stability. She slid down in her seat until she was nearly on the floorboard, shoulders shaking. The car's engine ticked softly, the rain pattering on the roof. She squeezed her eyes shut, letting the catharsis flow. She whispered apologies, to Mateo for her fear, to herself for every moment she thought she wasn't enough. After several minutes, the sobs ebbed. She blinked water from her eyes and inhaled deeply. She wiped her face on her sleeve and straightened. The tears had washed away some of the ache, leaving behind clarity. She slid back into the seat, hands gripping the wheel. "I'm stronger than this," she said aloud, voice hoarse. She reached into her bag and pulled out a notepad, scribbling a reminder. "Tomorrow, call lawyer, ask about will details. Meet Mateo's teacher. Laundry." Each item grounded her in concrete action. She started the engine. The windshield wipers swished rhythmically. On her dashboard, a small framed photo of Mateo grinned up at her, his arms around her neck in a midair hug. She touched the frame. "For you, mi amor," she murmured. "I'll keep going." As she drove home through empty streets, the rain eased. Headlights shimmered on wet pavement, and Alma's heart, though bruised, felt lighter than when she'd entered the garage. By the time she reached her apartment, the storm had passed. She climbed the narrow stairs, determination wrapped around her like a cloak. Tomorrow she would face the day, tired but unbroken. Monday dawned with a bright sun that cut through the gloom in Alma's heart. After dropping Mateo at school, she made her way to Elvira's house, portfolio and cleaning supplies in hand. She felt renewed purpose. The inheritance papers loomed, and she needed clarity before her meeting with the lawyer tomorrow. Elvira greeted her at the door, holding a small key. "Good morning, dear," she said. "I'd like your help again, this time with office files." Alma followed her up the stairs, anticipation bubbling in her chest. They passed the long-ignored locked door. Elvira paused, hand poised above the knob. "Today," she whispered. She slipped the key into the lock and turned. The door swung open with a soft creak, revealing a narrow room. Dust motes danced in the sunlight filtering through lace curtains. Alma's breath caught in her throat. Inside, shelves lined the walls, dusted photographs, neatly organized letters tied with ribbon, and stacks of leather-bound journals. An antique rocking chair faced a small writing desk cluttered with ink bottles and pens. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. Alma entered, fingertips grazing the spines of books. Elvira closed the door behind them and joined her. "I want you to understand why I left this room locked," she said. She pointed to a framed portrait on the desk, a young man with a kind smile, Daniel, her son. Tears stung Alma's eyes. Elvira lifted a journal from the desk and opened it. "These are his letters, written from abroad. He described the fields he crossed, the friends he made, his hopes for his family." She paused, voice thick. "He never sent them home. He died before I could read them." Alma gently lifted a bundle of letters bound with blue ribbon. Her fingers trembled. The top envelope bore Daniel's neat script. "To Mama, with love." She traced the words as though touching a living heart. A sob escaped her. Elvira settled into the rocking chair. "I locked this room out of grief and fear. I feared each memory would undo me." She looked at Alma. "You showed me it's better to let pain breathe, to let it shape you instead of cage you." Alma knelt beside her, placing the letters back. "Thank you," she whispered. "I promise to care for these stories." Elvira smiled through tears. "You understand me in a way I haven't known in years." Together they sat in the silent room, the locked door now open, grief transformed into shared understanding. In that sacred space, Alma realized her own wounds could be unlocked and healed, one brave step at a time. After their shared moment, Alma ventured deeper into the room. She lifted photo frames. Daniel in military uniform, his eyes bright with youth. Daniel holding a small boy's hand on a beach, laughter frozen in time. She arranged them carefully, noticing minor details: Daniel's wedding band, the date inscribed on the back, July 14th, 1998. Elvira watched from the chair. "He was my son," she said softly. "My daughter-in-law sent these after his death." She gestured to a stack of legal documents on a side table. Inside folder after folder lay deeds, insurance policies, and letters from orphanages. Alma opened one letter. It described Daniel's wishes, that if anything happened to him, his mother should use his savings to help families in need. Elvira dabbed at her eyes. "I couldn't bear to read these. But now," she trailed off, voice hopeful. Alma gently closed the folder. "He wanted to help," she said. She turned to Elvira. "That's why you're helping me." Elvira nodded. "Your kindness brought purpose back to my life." Daniel would be proud. They moved to the desk where an envelope marked "Last Will and Testament" lay. Alma carefully opened it. Inside, Elvira had bequeathed her home, land, and savings to Alma, and a portion to charity in Daniel's name. Alma's eyes widened. Tears welled as she looked at Elvira. "Why me?" she asked. Elvira's voice was steady. "Because you are the family I chose. Because dignity, like yours, deserves a future." Alma closed the envelope and folded the papers reverently. "I'll honor his wishes," she vowed, "and I'll use this house to help others, like he wanted." Elvira's smile was radiant, hope shining in her aged face. They sat together in that room, the sun streaming through lace curtains, dust motes dancing like memories reclaimed. Alma felt the weight of inheritance settle on her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a calling. In the quiet hush of the unlocked room, past and present wove together, shaping a future born of love, loss, and unwavering compassion. That evening, Alma and Elvira prepared to finalize the legal details. Lawyers' letters lay open on the kitchen table. Alma poured tea while Elvira reviewed the documents. Outside, dusk painted the sky in soft lavender. Elvira folded her hands. "Before we sign, there's something you should know." Alma paused. "Anything?" Elvira's eyes shone with unspoken memories. Daniel was more than a soldier. He was a dreamer. He wanted a community where no one suffered alone. She paused, voice trembling. "After he died, I locked this house away from the world. I became resentful, bitter." Alma listened, heart aching for the woman who had carried grief alone. Elvira continued, "Your arrival brought light back. You reminded me that sharing pain can mend it." She held Alma's gaze. "I wish I'd known sooner that love could live beyond loss." Alma reached for Elvira's hand. "Thank you for trusting me," she said. "I'll let this home breathe again, with children's laughter, neighbors sharing meals, families finding support." Tears slid down Elvira's cheeks. "Promise me you'll keep Daniel's dream alive." Alma squeezed her hand. "I promise," she vowed. "I'll name the daycare Elvira's Garden, a place where broken hearts can heal." They signed the final documents together, the pen's scratch echoing like a new beginning. Alma folded the papers and slipped them into an envelope. She stood and hugged Elvira tightly. "You've given me everything," she whispered. Elvira patted her back. "No," she said, voice firm. "You earned every bit of it." Later, after Mateo was tucked into bed, Alma stood in the locked room, now hers, surrounded by Daniel's letters and photographs. She touched the spines of the journals and closed her eyes. In that quiet, she could feel his presence, gentle, encouraging, proud. Tomorrow, she would call the orphanage and set up scholarships in Daniel's name. She would meet the neighbors and plan community events. And when Mateo needed her, she would be there, fully present, fully herself. Alma gazed at the locked room's open door, its gap framed in soft light. Grief had unlocked her past. Now compassion would fuel her future. With one final deep breath, she stepped forward into a life shaped by dignity, hope, and the unbreakable bond between mothers and children. The late morning sun slanted through the lace curtains as Alma sat at Mrs. Dawson's kitchen table, paper files spread before her like petals of possibility. Across from her, the town lawyer, Mr. Ngugi, tapped a silver pen against his desk pad. "This clause here," he said, sliding a letter-sized document toward Alma. names you as sole beneficiary of Elvira's estate, home, land, and her savings account. Alma's pulse fluttered. She unfolded the will and ran her finger down the pages. Every line spoke of trust, how Elvira had wanted her to have a stable home, how she believed in Alma's strength to carry on Daniel's legacy. Tears pricked her eyes. Mr. Ngugi cleared his throat. Legally, everything is in order. You may sign when ready. He pushed a pen forward. Alma closed her eyes, remembering Elvira's gentle smile the day she first unlocked the locked room, how she'd held Alma's hand and said, "Dignity like yours deserves a future." She lifted her gaze. "I thank you," she whispered to the lawyer, but her heart was with Elvira. She placed her hand on the pen and paused. The weight of the moment pressed down. This was more than inheritance. It was a calling to nurture the life she and Elvira had dreamed of. Just then, Mateo bounded into the room, school bag slung over one shoulder. "Mom, look." He held up a crayon drawing of their apartment, the daycare she planned. A white house with yellow trim, children laughing in a garden. Alma smiled through tears. "That's wonderful, mi amor." She lifted him onto her lap. "Soon, this will be our home, Elvira's home, and we'll fill it with laughter." Mateo beamed. "Can I help?" Alma hugged him tight. "Of course." Then she turned back to Mr. Ngugi and signed her name, each stroke steady, certain. When she finished, the lawyer collected the papers and offered congratulations. Alma tucked the folded documents into her bag. As she stood, she felt a surge of responsibility and pride. Outside, the wind rustled through blooming jacaranda trees. Alma paused at the sidewalk, breathing in the fragrance of renewal. She reached into her purse and drew out the legal envelope, pressing it to her heart. This home would be a place of safety, of memories honored, and of futures built from love. That afternoon, Alma and Mateo stood with boxes on the porch of Elvira's house. Neighbors waved as they carried supplies inside, paints, building blocks, and potted plants for the garden. Alma guided Mateo to the front lawn and knelt beside him. He planted a seedling in a hole they dug together. "To grow, we must nurture," she told him. "Just like people." He patted the soil with small hands and grinned. "It will be beautiful." Alma's eyes glistened. She placed her hand over his. "Yes, mi amor. It will." With each shovel of dirt, the legacy of Elvira's will came to life, rooted in dignity, watered by care, destined to bloom. That evening, the neighborhood gathered in Elvira's sunroom for a small celebration. Fresh flowers lined the windowsills, and the scent of jasmine drifted through open panes. Alma had invited Mrs. Dawson's closest friends, women who had known Daniel and Elvira for decades, to witness the transfer of ownership. As Alma spoke, voice warm and clear, she realized how easily this could be mistaken for opportunism. She paused, eyes scanning the kind faces before her. "Before we go on," she began, "there's something I must say." Murmurs rippled through the room. Alma squared her shoulders. "I am honored by Elvira's trust, but I must be clear. I did not work for this inheritance alone." A hush fell. She continued, "Elvira gave me more than a house. She gave me guidance, compassion, a model of resilience. It's because of her that I have the strength to raise Mateo, to open this home to others. I cannot accept this gift solely for myself." Gasps and gentle protests filled the air. Mrs. Dawson, seated on her favorite armchair, reached for Alma's hand. "Sweetheart," she said, voice cracking, "this is my final gift. I choose you." Alma shook her head. "I know, and I'm grateful. But I need you to know I will use this home for more than personal comfort. I will share it." She turned to the guests. "I propose we establish a community fund in Daniel's name, half the proceeds from the land sale to support single mothers, widows, and children in need." Faces brightened. One woman, clutching a lace handkerchief, nodded slowly. Daniel would have loved that. Another man wiped tears from his eyes. He always said no one should face hardship alone. Mrs. Dawson's eyes glistened. "Alma, you are exactly the person to carry on his dream." She squeezed Alma's hand. Alma folded and handed her the will documents. "Please sign again," she said. to allocate half the estate to the Daniel Dawson Memorial Fund. The widow complied, her signature shaky but resolute. Applause swelled as Alma and Mrs. Dawson embraced, the room humming with solidarity. Mateo leaned against Alma's leg, pride shining in his eyes. That night, alone in the unlocked room, Alma reviewed the newly revised will by lantern light. The legal pages glowed softly. A home for her family, a fund for the vulnerable. She traced the lines with her finger. Her refusal of full inheritance had created something larger than herself, a living tribute to community and compassion. As she blew out the lantern, Alma whispered into the quiet, "We did this together." And she believed, with every fiber of her being, that Elvira and Daniel's spirits smiled in approval. 3 weeks later, Alma arrived at Elvira's house to find the widow lying peacefully in her armchair, a light lavender shawl across her shoulders. The afternoon sun streamed through the open windows, illuminating her still form. Mateo stood by the doorway, tiny shoulders hunched. Alma rushed forward. She knelt beside Elvira, checking for signs of life. Gently, she took the widow's hand, cool and still. Tears welled as she realized Mrs. Dawson had slipped away quietly, perhaps content at last. They sat together around the body until the town doctor arrived, a longtime friend of Elvira's. After he confirmed the passing, Alma wrapped Elvira's shawl around her shoulders and smoothed the blanket across her knees. She kissed the widow's forehead. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling, "for everything." Mateo's sobs echoed through the sunroom. Alma scooped him up, cradling him close. "She loved you so much," Alma murmured into his hair. "She wanted you to be happy." He clung to her, tears dampening her blouse. Over the next days, plans for the funeral unfolded. Neighbors brought flowers and casseroles. The Daniel Dawson Memorial Fund Committee convened at the house, discussing scholarships and grants in Daniel's name. Yet amid the activity, a hollow ache followed Alma wherever she went. The friend who had guided her, who had trusted her with her deepest memories, was gone. On the morning of the funeral, Alma found a handwritten note tucked under a vase of lilies on Elvira's vanity. "My dearest Alma, this house is yours. Because dignity like yours is rare. Use it well. Love, E." Alma pressed the paper to her heart and wept. At the church service, the pews overflowed. Alma stood before the congregation as the minister shared stories of Elvira's kindness and Daniel's bravery. When the service concluded, Alma stepped to the pulpit. She cleared her throat, voice steady despite tears. "Elvira taught me that love is best lived in service to others. Today, we honor her by continuing her work, sharing this home, growing Elvira's garden, and helping those in need." Applause and soft sobs filled the sanctuary. Questions and condolences followed as mourners filed by the casket. Through it all, Alma held the note close, a final message from a woman who believed in her. That evening, Alma stood in the empty sunroom, her sunroom now, lighting candles before Daniel's photograph. Mateo placed fresh lavender sprigs at the base of the portrait. Alma knelt and murmured, "We'll make this home a haven, just as she wanted." In the quiet glow, she felt Elvira's presence guiding her onward. No sooner had news of Elvira's passing spread than the town's whispers resumed. Alma heard them on the street. "Inherited everything so fast. She always knew how to play the victim. Bet there's a catch." Rumors swirled that Alma had manipulated the old woman, used tears to secure a fortune. At the community center meeting for Daniel's Memorial Fund, Alma gathered women and men around a table draped in white. She outlined the first grants, small loans for single mothers, after-school tutoring scholarships, emergency rent assistance. When she mentioned Mrs. Dawson's note, a man in the back snorted, "Sounds too convenient." Alma met his gaze. "Elvira wrote those words herself," she said quietly. "She trusted me." The man shifted uncomfortably. A volunteer whispered, "Ignore them. They don't understand." Others nodded, but the sting of suspicion lingered, a reminder that generosity often breeds envy. Later, Alma walked through the grocery store. A woman in the produce aisle averted her eyes when Alma approached. Whispers trailed when she passed. Alma gripped a head of lettuce so tightly her knuckles paled. She remembered Mrs. Dawson's faith in her and steadied her breath. That night, Mateo asked, "Why do they say bad things about you, Mom?" His voice trembled with confusion. Alma swallowed guilt. She drew him into a hug. "Sometimes, when people don't understand kindness, they turn it into something ugly." She brushed his hair back. "But we know the truth. We'll keep doing good anyway." He nodded, hugging her back. "I'm proud of you." In the days that followed, Alma pressed on. She finalized plans for Elvira's garden daycare, painted walls sunny yellow, and recruited volunteers. Slowly, children's laughter filled the halls, and neighbors brought toys and books. With each smiling child, Alma felt vindicated. One afternoon, the skeptical volunteer from a fund meeting returned, this time with coffee and homemade bread. "I'm sorry I doubted you," she said. "Seeing how hard you work, I was wrong." Alma offered a gentle smile. "Thank you for giving me a chance." The woman wiped her eyes. Elvira would be proud. As dusk settled over the town, Alma stood at the daycare's window, watching children chase each other in the yard. Despite the gossip, she had turned mockery into motivation, proof that dignity, like Mrs. Dawson said, was indeed rare. And in the laughter of those children, Alma found the sweetest revenge, a life built on grace, not spite. On a crisp autumn morning, Alma gathered at the small cemetery with members of the Dawson family, friends of Elvira, and townspeople who had come to pay respects. Wild chrysanthemums bloomed at her feet as she approached the graveside, Mateo clutching her hand. The sky was a clear blue, a silent benediction on a day of closure and remembrance. The minister spoke of Elvira's compassion and Daniel's sacrifice. Alma watched as the congregation nodded, faces solemn yet warm. When the service ended, the casket was lowered into the earth, accompanied by soft weeping. Alma stepped forward, placing a single lavender sprig atop the casket. She knelt and whispered, "Thank you for trusting me. I will honor your legacy every day." Behind her, a cluster of skeptics hovered at the fringes, shadows of doubt, softened by the morning light. Ruth stood among them, lips pressed tight, eyes glistening. Alma turned and offered a small nod, an olive branch acknowledging even betrayal could give way to respect. Next to Ruth, Tom watched in respectful silence. He'd volunteered at the daycare all week, earning children's trust and Alma's cautious gratitude. He held his son's hand and didn't speak, simply standing witness to the legacy he once abandoned. When the crowd dispersed, Mr. Ngugi approached, tipping his hat. "The memorial fund is fully capitalized," he said quietly. "We'll distribute the first grants next month." Alma nodded and shook his hand, thankful for every ally. Left at the graveside were Alma, Mateo, Ruth, and Tom. A gentle breeze stirred the grass. Alma inhaled the fresh air, filling her lungs with bittersweet freedom. "She'd be proud," she said softly to her son. He squeezed her hand. Ruth cleared her throat. I'm sorry, Alma." The words felt tentative but genuine. Alma studied her sister's face. Hardened by time, guilt softened her features. She extended her hand. "Thank you for saying that." They shook hands. A fragile truce formed in the shade of maple trees. Tom stepped forward. I've seen how much you've done, how much she believed in you. I'm sorry for everything." Alma met his gaze. "Actions matter more than words," she replied. "Join us in keeping her dream alive." Tom nodded, eyes bright. As they walked away from the gravesite, the four of them moved toward the future, bound not by blood but by shared purpose. Behind them, the headstone read, "Elvira Dawson, beloved mother, friend, and guardian of hope." Alma glanced back once more, heart full. Her journey had led her from abandonment and mockery to legacy and community. And in that final chapter, marked by forgiveness, unity, and remembrance, she knew she had fulfilled Mrs. Dawson's greatest wish, to let love flourish, even after the last farewell. Alma paused on the threshold of the Dawson house, now officially her own, and drew a slow breath. The late autumn sun slanted through the lace curtains, illuminating motes of dust that danced like fireflies in the air. Silence reigned in every room, a sacred hush that felt both strange and comforting after months of relentless upheaval. She set down the last box and let the front door close behind her with a soft click, sealing out the world's chaos. Mateo bounded past her, backpack thumping against the hardwood floor. He darted to the far corner of the living room, where Mrs. Dawson's cherished rocking chair sat polished and upright. With solemn curiosity, he traced the carved arms and ran his fingertips along the faded upholstery. "Mom," he murmured, "it's so quiet here." Alma smiled, smoothing the curl at his temple. "Quiet can be a gift," she said. "It means we finally have a place to rest." She helped him unpack a small crate of toys, arranging wooden blocks and picture books on a low shelf. Each object felt like a bridge between past and future, tokens of their new life. Together they explored chamber by chamber. The cozy study lined with built-in bookshelves, the kitchen with its vintage stove and sturdy oak table, and the sunroom where lavender still bloomed in ceramic pots. Alma touched the ornate molding and imagined painting the walls in warm, inviting hues. She pictured children's laughter echoing through the halls, the clatter of dishes, the murmur of conversation at dinner-table gatherings, life returning to every corner. In the center of the house, she lit a single candle on the mantel, her silent vow to honor Mrs. Dawson's spirit. The flame flickered, casting honey-gold light across a portrait of Daniel in uniform. Alma felt a surge of gratitude for the house, for the inheritance, for the legacy entrusted to her care. She settled in the rocking chair, Mateo curling beside her on the plush rug. In the hush, they sat together, the chair's gentle sway marking time in peaceful cadence. As evening approached, Alma stoked the old stove and warmed soup in a heavy pot. The aroma of simmering carrots and rosemary filled the kitchen, mingling with the lingering scent of lavender. Mateo set two mismatched plates on the oak table, silverware that once belonged to Elvira, and poured glasses of water. When they sat down, Alma raised her bowl. "To the house of quiet," she toasted, voice clear in the stillness. "May it always remind us that silence can heal." Mateo smiled and echoed her words. They ate in companionable silence, the hush wrapping around them like a comforting blanket. Later, she tucked him into his new bed beneath the sloping ceiling of the upstairs nursery. He clutched his teddy bear and whispered, "I love the quiet with you, Mom." She pressed a kiss to his forehead. "Me too, mi amor." After turning off the last light, Alma wandered back downstairs and gazed out the rain-spattered window. The empty rooms glowed softly in the lamplight, waiting to be filled with life and love. In that moment, she understood that the house of quiet was more than bricks and beams. It was a sanctuary for hearts to rest, for memories to settle, and for hope to grow. And as she closed her eyes, she felt Mrs. Dawson's gentle presence, a guiding spirit in the serene hush of home. Winter's first frost glazed the Dawson house's windows when Tom appeared on the porch one afternoon, breath visible in the crisp air. Alma spotted him through the lace curtain, hesitating in the snow-dusted doorway. Her heart clenched at the memory of his earlier betrayal, but this time something in his shoulders, slumped, uncertain, made her pause. She opened the door a crack. "Tom," she said evenly. He swallowed and looked past her at the tidy home, the wreath of dried lavender on the door, the footprints of Mateo in the snow. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice raw. Inside, the furnace's warm glow beckoned. Alma stepped aside. "Come in." He entered, removing his gloves with trembling fingers. Alma closed the door and led him to the living room, where Mateo played with wooden blocks by the hearth. The boy looked up and froze. Tom's eyes softened. "Hi, Bud," he whispered. Mateo nodded and returned to his construction. Once alone, Alma folded her arms. "Why are you here?" Tom swallowed. I've been fired. Ruth kicked me out. I have nowhere to go." His gaze flicked to the family photos on the mantel, the study desk where Elvira's letters had rested. "I was ashamed to come back," he said. "But winter is coming, and I realized I need a place to sleep. I can pay rent. I can help around the house." Alma's chest tightened. The wind howled outside, making the windows shiver. She thought of the hush in the house of quiet, of the sanctuary she'd fought so hard to create for Mateo. Welcoming Tom would fracture that peace. Yet he looked so vulnerable, so human. She drew in a breath. "I won't turn you away," she said finally. "But this isn't an invitation to rebuild our marriage. You're a lodger. You help with chores, pay what you can. and keep your distance." Tom's relief was palpable. "Thank you," he murmured. "That's all I ask." They shook on the agreement. That evening, he unloaded his battered suitcase into a guest room and began clearing snow from the walk. Alma watched from the window, torn between wariness and compassion. Over the next week, Tom rose before dawn to feed the wood stove, swept the porch, and carried in groceries. His presence was quiet, respectful, but Alma found herself tense when she passed him in the hall. She reminded herself, he was here out of necessity, not forgiveness. One morning, she found fresh logs stacked by the hearth and a pot of wild mint tea on the stove. A note read, "I'm sorry for everything. Let me earn my keep." Alma folded the paper and placed it in her pocket. She poured a cup of tea, inhaling its sharp aroma. In the hush of the kitchen, she realized that Tom's return, though born of desperation, had forced her to set new boundaries. The house of quiet remained her fortress, but now it sheltered another soul in need. As she sipped the tea, she resolved to maintain her dignity and protect her son, even as she extended cold compassion to the man who once broke her heart. Spring arrived in tentative whispers, buds on the magnolia, crocuses nudging through the thawing ground, when Tom finally asked what Alma had dreaded most. They stood in the sunroom, light pooling around stacks of boxes waiting to become Elvira's garden daycare. He cleared his throat. "Alma, can we talk?" His tone held a mixture of hope and fear. She set down the rolled-up schedule she was drafting. "Yes." His lips pressed together. He rubbed his hands on his jeans as though steadying himself. "I know our agreement," he began. "I'm grateful for your mercy. But I'd like more than a lodge's existence. I want to be part of your life again, for Mateo's sake and mine." Alma felt her pulse stutter. He had helped with chores, respected her space, even smiled at Mateo's antics. Yet forgiving him fully was a different matter. She inhaled, recalling every tear he had caused, every shame-filled night she'd cried alone. The house of quiet meant safety, not capitulation. "Tom," she said softly, "I appreciate your effort, but our marriage ended for a reason. You left us once. You betrayed my trust twice. I cannot give you my heart again." He flinched as though struck. The sun slipped behind a cloud, shadowing his face. He opened his mouth, then closed it. She continued, voice steady but kind. "I forgive you for Mateo's sake, and for mine. But forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. The hardest word is goodbye." Tears glistened in his eyes. "Goodbye," he whispered, voice hoarse. "You want me to leave?" Alma's throat tightened. "No," she clarified. "I want you to stay out of our hearts. Stay as a friend, if you can maintain that boundary." She traced a line in the dust on the windowsill. "We need closure, not confusion." He nodded slowly, swallowing. "I understand." Silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken pain. Then Tom stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. The gesture was gentle, respectful. "Thank you for being honest," he said. "I'll leave the door open, but I won't cross the line again." Alma felt relief ripple through her. The house of quiet had sustained her through loss and betrayal. Now it would shelter her with clarity and resolve. She offered him a small smile. "That means more than you know." As he turned to walk away, she whispered, "Goodbye, Tom." He paused at the doorway, nodded once, then disappeared into the bright spring day, leaving Alma and Mateo to rebuild their lives in peace, with only love and forgiveness as their guides. On a warm Saturday morning, Alma unlocked the front door for the first official event of Elvira's Garden Daycare, the open house. Neighbors lined the walkway, holding cups of lemonade and homemade muffins. Balloons bobbed in the gentle breeze, and laughter fluttered like butterflies around the garden. Alma stood on the porch with Mateo at her side, heart fluttering with excitement and nervous pride. "Welcome," she called, smiling. "Come in and see what we've created together." The front door swung wide, and visitors stepped into the sunlit foyer. Inside, colorful artwork, handprints in bright acrylic, adorned the walls. Small tables bore books and puzzles. Soft cushions invited children to curl up for story time. The air smelled of fresh paint and sunshine. Mrs. Ajoa from down the street knelt beside Mateo. "You did this," she asked, voice warm. He puffed out his chest. Mom did, he said. I helped too. Alma hugged him, then led the crowd through the living room turned playroom. She explained how grants from the Daniel Dawson Memorial Fund had paid for supplies, and how half of Mrs. Dawson's estate funded scholarships for families in need. Guests moved to the sunroom, where a table held sign-up sheets and information packets. Alma pointed out the raised garden beds outside. Next week, we'll plant vegetables and flowers, she said. Children will learn where food comes from, just as Elvira wanted. A group of enthusiastic mothers clustered near the refreshment table. One whispered, I was skeptical, but look at this place. Another nodded. It's warm, welcoming, just like home. Alma felt tears prick her eyes. The purpose she and Elvira had shared was now alive in every corner. By midday, children flooded the rooms, chasing each other in the hall, collaborating on block towers, listening intently as Alma read a story beneath a canopy of paper lanterns. In the kitchen area, volunteers served snacks on mismatched plates that once belonged to Mrs. Dawson. The farmhouse table groaned under bowls of fruit and cheese. As the sun dipped west, the open house wound down. Visitors lingered in the garden, sipping lemonade and admiring budding sunflowers. Alma and Mateo stood by the picket fence, watching families wave goodbye. We did it, Mom, he said softly, leaning against her leg. She kissed the top of his head. We did, she agreed. That night, as Alma closed the door to the empty house, she gazed at the colorful handprints still bright on the walls. In the hush, she felt Elvira's warm approval. The house of quiet had become a house of joy, learning, and community, an open invitation to all who needed a safe place. And as she flipped off the last light, Alma knew that every future laugh and shared story would honor the legacy of kindness and hope entrusted to her heart. On a golden autumn afternoon, Alma and Mateo sat on a weathered bench in the garden, surrounded by ripening pumpkins and sunflowers bending toward the sky. A small group of mothers and children gathered for the first Family Stories event, a celebration of resilience, each participant sharing tales of hardship and triumph. Alma smiled at her son, whose dark curls caught flickers of sunlight. Ready, mi amor? She asked. Mateo grinned and stood, clutching the notebook where he'd drawn pictures of their journey. He stepped forward, voice small but clear. I want to tell everyone how my mom carried me and never gave up. The gathered crowd watched as he showed drawings of the grocery line, the daycare sign, and their new home crowned with lavender. Applause broke out, and Alma's eyes shimmered. Next, Alma stood behind the lectern, a simple wooden stand carved by her late father, and cleared her throat. They said no man would want baggage, she began, voice steady. They whispered that a single mother with a child and no spouse would be unlovable. But I carried every piece of my story, my son, my pain, my pride, and it led me here. Her words rang true in the hush of the garden. She pointed to the house beyond. This house, she said, once locked away its secrets. Now it opens its doors to all who need shelter, support, and hope. She spoke of Elvira's legacy, Daniel's dream, and the community that had rallied around Elvira's garden. When she finished, tears glistened on many cheeks. A mother approached and kissed Alma's hand. Thank you for carrying our stories, she said. A father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders, smiling. You gave us our voices back. Alma looked at Mateo, pride warming her chest. He tugged her hand, and they walked through the garden path lined with handprints and family photos on wooden stakes, testimonies to lives transformed. The sun sank low, painting the sky in crimson and gold. As dusk settled, Alma and Mateo paused at the gate. He threw his arms around her waist. I'm proud you're my mom, he whispered. Alma hugged him tight. And I'm proud to be your mom. They stepped into the golden light, leaving behind the whispers of no man wants baggage. Instead, they carried laughter, community, and the unshakable truth that love and dignity were the greatest inheritance of all. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please like, comment, and share. Also turn on the bell to get more of our videos. See you in the next story.